G'day folks, welcome to Give Me the Remote. It is episode 31 and it's the 30th of January 2019. Nearly 1 month into summer movies. I'm Sheridan.
And I'm John. Hello. How are we all? It's the day after my birthday.
It is. John's birthday and summer movies.
Just have to say happy birthday to myself around here.
Great month. So, what do you want to start off with, birthday boy?
Oh, let's start off with IO.
Really, we like to start off so we can only to a point where we can only improve from.
Start off with a lot. Yeah, look. This is another one of these glossy feature movies for Netflix that, in the glorious tradition of Bird Box, is just unbelievably stupid. They're
really into the post-apocalyptic movies at the moment.
I get that, but you know, you can make Mad Max Fury Road, or you can make IO. The budget would not be enormous. Okay, Fury Road did have all the...
Fury Road was pretty big budget, I think.
Pretty big budget. Okay, I grant you that. But
this is just two people in a cornfield.
You can do two people in a cornfield and be very clever, though.
This was not clever.
Shall we talk about the ways in which this is not clever?
All right, so basic storyline. Post-apocalyptic world where there seems to be very, very few, if any, humans still living on Earth. Cataclysmic event made the air toxic. And
in parts.
This is what thoughts we'll get to. And then humanity moved to Io, which is a moon of Jupiter,
mm-hmm.
which I found out from talking to John that doesn't seem like a very plausible place for humanity to set up shop because there's no water there.
Well, it is apparently the driest body in the solar system, and that includes Mercury, which is basically inside the sun, has more water than Io.
So anyway, they're all up there.
There's drinkable water still on Earth, but apparently all the humans are living on Io.
So they're all up there, and there's a few humans living down there, and there's going to be the last ship to go to Io called Exodus.
I think the whole program's called Exodus.
Yeah, you might be right.
I mean, there's a ship leaving to go to
Sam
Io.
is a daughter of a very famous scientist who is living on a hill with...
And in Io world, scientist means you do all the science.
Oh, yeah, everything. And one day she's tending to her vegetable garden, which she's able to manage on top of her pristine mountaintop
observatory, so they're astrophysicists, not biologists or chemists.
Well,
that's important.
They're agriculturalists as well because they're growing their food.
Self-sufficient.
And a gentleman visitor comes and arrives and says he wants to see her father quickly. Sort of, well, can we spoil it?
Yeah.
Father's not there. So, and then Micah and her and Sam try and...
Now, his arrival in the hot air balloon... Well, not air balloon, it's a helium balloon. Anyway, he's in a helium balloon with a capsule, fully sealed capsule, so he can go through the bad air, I guess. That's a really cool scene.
But there's actually...
it's beautifully shot.
Yeah, and the pacing of it isn't too bad. So there's no... The thing about this, right, for a post-apocalyptic movie, there's no action. There's no demons coming out. There's no threat other than the air condition, which is not particularly fast-moving. I mean, the only thing that's, is poses danger is if she runs out of air when she's in the toxic zone.
Yeah.
But she's pretty switched on scientist. She's always carrying a lot of air with her.
There's a nasty storm.
But I didn't really feel as though she was under any particular threat. I felt as though her living conditions were going to be made more negative as a consequence of the storm. But I didn't feel as though the storm was going to kill her. I didn't feel particularly
There wasn't
alarming.
a huge sense of jeopardy. I think there was supposed to be a sense that maybe the storm was blowing the bad air into her space, but then it didn't, so...
But also... How the frig is she... How air goes up.
It goes down as well.
Yeah, but
it
doesn't make any sense that she's up there.
The dumbest thing is this idea that humans who have the resources and capacity to build a permanent settlement in one of the moons of Jupiter out beyond the asteroid belt...
can't just go up a hill.
Yeah, or... Well, or why wouldn't they stay in Earth, which already has everything they need, except apparently some breathable air, and go to Io, which has none of the things they need, and also doesn't have breathable air?
Yeah, it's so dumb.
And then they say, oh, we're going to send a ship to Alpha Centauri, which is another star system, which even if you could travel at the speed of light would take 4 years to get to. And even when you get there, there's no guarantee that there's anything there that human beings need.
Look, I mean, to be honest, I spent grade 8 science, which is the extent of my science, throwing spitballs at the teacher.
Right.
And even I was like, this is bullshit.
Yeah, mind your language.
Sorry. Don's always telling me that I can't swear.
Don't want to lose our clean tag on iTunes.
Is this like the Deadpool that we reviewed last week? Don't I get like one BS an episode before I lose the clean tag?
Let's just try and keep the language clean. Some of our listeners might have children listening while they listen to our podcast. You never know. Let's keep moving. Io. So, turns out that as well as being an astrophysicist with a huge telescope, which seems quite specialised in the astrophysicsy world, Dad was also a biochemist, biologist who's just about cracked the code of how humans can survive the air, which makes you think all the big brain scientists who've relocated out past the asteroid belt to the moons of Jupiter, maybe they should have put in some more work here on the ground. And what's the other thing that really bugged me?
There's some really so the main character Sam's played by Margaret Qualley, who was in The Leftovers, which is sort of a similar kind of theme show, I guess, in some ways.
I thought her performance in this was great. She played crazy, very convincingly.
Yeah, I mean, she's a person that grew up, I guess, very isolated, and she plays that well. Mike is played by Anthony Mackie, who's been in quite a few big movies, but in small roles like $1 Million Baby, Hurt Locker.
Yeah, I mean, he's building himself up in this into that Will Smith role that Will Smith's getting a little old for. I think he's got a good little niche coming up for himself there.
Yeah, Will Smith was a much bigger star by the time he was the same age, but anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, Will Smith's a once-in-a-lifetime charismatic, though.
Yeah.
You know?
Anyway, he's pretty good, but there's some really, really awkward moments, like where...
Why have they got messages on cassette tapes that they're broadcasting?
The cassette tapes. They're using cassette tapes.
Why wouldn't you just have a file on your computer? They've got computers that you just hit and loop on.
Yeah. There's some really awkward scripted moments.
Some
where,
weird anachronisms.
You know, like he's out sort of in the field contemplating how crap things are going. And then he walks, so you got these sort of long shots of him out in the field, you know,
chewing the scenery moments.
Yeah, like worried about how he's going to get the balloon off. And then presumably it takes him ages to walk back to the shelter. But by the time he comes back to the shelter, he's like slamming doors and going, "Jeez, what? I can't believe it," you know, like going off about.
We don't have enough helium!
It's like, but you kind of had like the whole walk. Like, I think you probably calmed down on the walk, like not got angrier. It didn't make any sense. Like, it's just really over dramatized.
And I'm not willing to blaming the actors on this. Because
no, it was totally the writers.
It's got to be
totally
the direction.
The writers.
Yeah.
Because they were pretty good actors. Like, in fact, it's the only thing that makes this movie watchable is those two.
The cinematography is great. It's almost like the weaknesses of Australian movies are infecting these things, because Australian movies for years have been technically very well made, just with terrible stories. And it's like everyone wants to keep making more and more and more content, and no one's writing better and better stories.
I'm not sure I agree with that analogy, but
sure.
I mean, I think the problem with Australian stories or movies for a period of time is that they're making movies that are good, but they're just movies no one wants to watch.
If no one wants to watch them, I would argue they're not good.
Anyway, we'll have to agree to disagree on that. All right, so what are you giving it?
2 stars.
I've got to go. I think I've got to go 1.
Yeah, right.
There was a few moments when I watched this movie where I literally exploded at how irritating and stupid it was.
And the ending, which we are not going to spoil, is...
Oh, the ending is the worst!
Yeah, okay. So what's next?
Let's do The Good Place Season 3.
Season 3, which starts in Australia, and Australians have a lot of views on the depiction of Australia. in The Good Place.
Yeah, but we're used to being depicted in a very false manner by Americans.
And it very much is a depiction of Australia as being a place just like America, but with funny accents.
Yeah, which is, I don't think it is at all. And there was a scene in a coffee shop where they serve cafe Americano. And as every Australian would know, we call that a long black because coffee doesn't centre itself around America.
And we certainly don't brand our coffee in American terms.
Because American coffee is rubbish. And we have the best coffee in the world.
Well, we have the coffee that we like, and we think it's the best in the world.
I'm pretty sure our baristas keep winning prizes in world coffee competitions.
Yeah, we hear about the prizes they win in world coffee competitions, but I haven't actually done an analysis. I've written many a story about an Australian barista winning a prize, but I haven't actually done an analysis of how many prizes they entered.
How many Americans are winning.
Yeah.
I think we can all be rest assured, though, that American coffee is rubbish in comparison.
I have once in my entire life seen Cafe Americano offered in an Australian cafe.
Where?
Cafe Essen used to do one, but they tried to offer every variety of coffee ever made at the time. They had 100 different coffee ways to serve it on their menu.
I don't feel as though that was representative of coffee.
I did say it was the only time ever, didn't I? So
anyway.
Not exactly representative.
So as you can see, there's a lot of debate about how Australia is depicted in The Good Place. Well, not even debate, because it was just
outrage,
wrong.
I think. I was actually okay with it. I thought as a outsider's view, most of it was actually pretty dead accurate in that we are a vapid bunch of oiks.
The accents were pretty bad, though.
I thought the accents were no worse than Australians attempting American accents or Australians attempting British accents. Or...
Oh, come on. We've got heaps of Australian actors that go to America and they're amazing at doing American accents.
We've got heaps who are amazing. We've got plenty who aren't.
Like who?
Well, obviously not the ones working in America. The only thing that really hit a bum note for me was there's a scene where they tried to make it seem like Australia's gun culture was shockingly lax by American standards, which...
Yes.
That's kind of the opposite of how it works.
And actually really offensive to us because you don't really get shot by guns in Australia.
Well, you could in the outback, but you got to work at it.
You've basically got to be in a bikie gang or in the outback and really, really unlucky.
Or cross a bikie gang will do it.
Even then, the innocent bystanders rarely go in.
But selling on their patch will get you.
Yeah, but then I feel as though that's sort of participating in the culture.
True, you've transgressed from the norms.
You got more chance of being bitten by a snake and dying.
I don't know. It would be close. Yeah. And you'd have to annoy the snake because almost 90% of people bitten by snakes in Australia have been trying to kill the snake at the time.
Much like people that get shot by bikie gangs.
Yeah. So we didn't like that. Other than that, I thought this was really good in that the wheels had kind of fallen off The Good Place and had nowhere to go, and they actually managed to turn the story around and take it to new places and have the characters grow.
I was a little worried, I have to say, in the first half of the season, because I felt like those wheels were still falling off. I thought the Australia stuff was a bit what's the point of this? I don't really...
It was somewhat directionless, yeah.
But at this point, I guess, if you're watching the show, you're somewhat invested in the characters, and I think it's fair to say, without giving any spoilers away at the end, that there is quite a payoff for you if you are invested in the characters at the end of the season.
And they're also set up to just do it all again in season 4 as well, which I thought was a little disappointing.
Yeah, I feel like this show has kind of become one of those things that I just sort of put on if I kind of don't really want to watch TV or I don't know what to watch.
Well, particularly the way we're stuck, we can't binge it. We're stuck watching just 20 minutes every week, which doesn't really fit into anyone's schedules anymore.
Is it on Netflix in Australia?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's unusual for Netflix to do the weekly release.
I think it's because of wherever it's coming from in America. There's a few shows, like I'm watching Discovery Season 2, which again is dragging me out week by week, and I'm finding it increasingly hard to watch shows like that. And we're still waiting for the South Park Season 22 to start its second half, which is also annoying. Yeah,
although in Australia that is on SBS On Demand, isn't it? Which is...
Yeah, but again, you're still waiting for it to get dragged out weekly.
I know, but the free-to-air, free free-to-air licensing is a bit different.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's been we've been dragging through 13 weeks of watching it, and there was a Christmas hiatus.
Yeah, it has felt like it's been going for a long time.
Yeah.
Sometimes I mean, I'm going to counter what you've just said. Sometimes I don't actually mind that drip feeding because it feels like the old way of watching TV. Like where my eyeballs aren't hanging out because I've watched like 4 episodes in a row and I've just like lost all friggin' concept of reality or even what a show's about because I just have binged the crap out of it.
Yeah.
Whereas at least with the weekly drip feed, you kind of... It's like they're giving you a little small packet of chips.
Look, I think...
It's like a fun-sized chips. Like you can't just gorge that whole bag.
I think Game of Thrones gets away with it because there is so much drama packed into an hour of Game of Thrones that you basically need the next week to deconstruct it and unpack it. And I don't think The Good Place has that level of drama.
True.
The Good Place is fun. Good Place has nice characters. Good Place has Ted Danson just being a charming old bugger. He's also playing an admiral in the Orville at the moment, so there's quite a lot of Ted Danson playing with his gravitas going around at the moment. Look, if you haven't watched The Good Place, which the premise is it's a bunch of people who die and then they try and figure out how to get from the bad place to the good place, or even what constitutes the good place, and a lot of this season is coming to the conclusion that no one's ever getting to the good place anymore because life is so complicated. It's impossible to weigh the moral implications of any of your actions.
It's a very philosophical show.
It's all highly philosophical. I mean, they're debating Kant and Plato and all sorts of cool concepts like that. I think there was a moment we were watching it, didn't I? When they said something, I was like, "Oh, that's Plato," and you rolled your eyes at me, and then they said it was Plato.
I think that was actually in the IO.
Oh, was it? Oh,
yeah, there's a lot of quoting of Plato in the IO.
Yeah, I never liked Plato. Sorry. Well, that went sideways. Look, so yeah, The Good Place season 1 is fantastic. Season 2 sort of drags. Season 3 they've found another direction that's almost entirely taken the show back to where it started. Season 1.
Yeah. So how many stars would you give it?
3.5, just because I like everyone.
I'm gonna go 3.
Yeah.
I feel like it's one of those like 3-star kind of like comfortable jumpers that you don't want to throw away, but you don't really care if you keep it. I don't know if Marie Kondo would want you to keep it. I don't know if you're finding joy in it. There's probably a bit of joy.
Yeah. I think if I was wearing this jumper and someone pushed me into a swimming pool, I wouldn't be sad or angry.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be sad if they cancelled it.
Yeah, if it just ended now, that'd be okay.
Yeah. But then I'm like, I'm happy to watch it.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be as enthusiastic for season 4 of The Good Place as we were for season 3.
True.
We'll just be like, Netflix says it's got new episodes. Oh yeah, let's give it a go. So yeah, very solid 3-star sort of episode. So what's next?
Ted Bundy on Netflix, which I think is called Confessions of a Killer.
Conversations with a Killer.
Conversations with a Killer.
Look, I'll get it right in the title for this podcast.
We need to get this right because...
It's just the Ted Bundy show on Netflix. And I was thinking about this today while I was walking the dogs. And if this had been the first true crime documentary on Netflix, this would be blowing people's socks off. This would be headlines in newspapers. I think this has got better stakes. I think this is actually one of the better ones.
All right, so I've reflected on this quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is very well made. So for people that don't know, which if you don't know who Ted Bundy is, you're probably never going to watch this show. But actually, if you don't know who Ted Bundy is, this would probably be the perfect show for you to watch. But Ted Bundy killed, it's an unknown number, but it's at least 30 women.
He's one of the most prolific serial killers in history.
He was, and he killed in an extremely short period of time. Like, I think it was about 4 or 5 years. He's very well known. Part of the reason he is extremely well known is he is very charismatic. He's very good looking. Even, like, there's a lot of footage of him from his appearances in court and interviews and things. there is something about him that you can't actually quite sort of understand.
He's also got a friendly face, and you can imagine him pulling up a stool next to you in a bar and giving you the "oh shucks" treatment. You'd be thinking, "Oh, this guy's nice."
Yeah, and he's actually like an example of how appearance and just natural good looks and charm do get you a lot of places that you don't otherwise. But also there's an unbelievability because of that, because of his appearance, that he could actually do the things he did, because he was an extremely violent killer and would do...
dismembering bodies,
and
necrophilia.
visiting bodies when they were completely decomposed, kept severed heads in his apartment. And actually one of the things that I found frustrating about this show is if you don't know that, they don't actually talk a lot about the details of what he did.
They bring it up late, and I think that's part of their storytelling and their pacing.
They don't bring out, though,
the scale of the horror.
Yeah. And, I mean, there's a few reasons probably for that. One is he wasn't actually convicted of... It's a little bit ambiguous how many people he killed. It's like, it's sort of unknown. He wasn't convicted for that many murders. He's never confessed to them fully. He constantly changes his story.
Yeah, when he thought that talking to the FBI about the murders he committed could keep his death sentence on ice, he talked a lot more. And that makes him quite unreliable as well.
So the documentary is sort of centered for Ted Bundy like, when I say fans, I mean true crime
followers.
Fans.
Yeah. They're fans. Come on, half of these people would have been lining up for a conjugal if they could have.
Look, I'm a true crime fan, right? So, and I have read a lot about Ted Bundy and over the years, but I mean, so what's appealing about this for people that know a lot about Ted Bundy is there is some tapes that he made with two journalists while he was on death row that have been written about but not actually released before. So there's something new there to an extent, though, because I think all the content of it has been written about.
Yeah.
And so because he never confessed to them, what these journalists do quite cleverly is say, how about you tell us what you think this serial killer, what motivated them and what they were thinking while they committed the crimes.
The FBI
and
was using him as a profiler for other serial killers as well.
I feel that we'll get to that in a sec. So, what he does is talks in the third person about what this theoretical killer would have been thinking while he murdered these women. And so that's something you haven't actually heard before. But they do close off the series with saying that he helped the FBI be with profiling.
Which was a science they pretty much invented to catch him.
But personally, I think that was somewhat of a beat up. And actually, I think it was a very unfair attribution to give to Bundy. And is I found it a little awkward, to be honest. I found it a little bit like glorifying him.
I did, I was quite amazed because I didn't know about it, with how many times he managed to escape custody.
He's an extremely clever person.
Not just clever, but his opportunism and his ability...
Yeah, and fearless.
When a moment presented itself to just start running.
Yeah. And that is part of the reason he was such a successfully prolific killer, because he was opportunistic.
There was a chillingly telling moment when someone from the FBI was talking, I think, on radio, and there was a recording of it, and they just said, people are creatures of habit, and he will revert to his habits, and we will be waiting. And there he was. He always liked driving VW Beetles around, and 6 months later, he was in another state hundreds of miles away, and he was driving a VW Beetle, and...
there were a lot of them around.
I know, but, you know, they were, that was one of the things they were looking for, you know. And if he had been able to break his habits, they never would have caught him.
He got a bit lazy with being on the run too. He got tired of it. I mean, he was living in some pretty awful conditions at some points where he wasn't able to access food and things, and he kind of gave up, at least on one of them.
Yeah, but also if he had been able, it's people returning to their habits is an interesting thing, even when their habits are appalling and dangerous.
I mean, the murders he committed on one of those escapes was just, that was one of the most terrifying moments of any serial killer. He killed like 4 people in the space of 2 days. I mean, it was just a complete frenzy that hadn't really been sort of seen before or probably since.
And I thought the interviews, which were quite extensive with friends of his, were really interesting. They even had footage of his mother talking about how she viewed him, which again I thought was really interesting. I don't think his mother ever fully accepted that he'd done anything.
The frustrating thing though about that is that failed. That kind of made out that he had this sort of relatively normal upbringing, which he did not. He actually grew up thinking his mother was his sister, and it is not confirmed, but it is thought that his grandfather is his father because he was an extremely abusive man, and that explains a lot about why he was the way he was, but that is not canvassed at all in this documentary.
No, this documentary is more a series of recorded conversations to tell a story rather than a...
There's a lacking of complexity about there's so much known about Ted Bundy, and they fail to kind of explore that. So I feel as though if you didn't know who Ted Bundy was, you actually would come into this going, oh my God, how can this guy have committed these murders? He seems so normal. He seems like a handsome guy, went to law school, everyone liked him. But there is actually quite a complicated story that has been trodden over quite a bit that does explain why he did what he did. Or at least may explain why he did what he did.
Yeah, and towards the end of the last episode, they spend a lot of time just showing footage of the pretty repugnant protesters who came out to celebrate his execution.
That was actually quite interesting. I felt that was something I sort of hadn't been aware of.
They certainly looked like a much more unpleasant bunch than even Mr. Bundy, the sex mutilator.
I'm not sure about that, but because he did die by electric chair, and so when he died, there was a lot of people that came out, and like hundreds of people celebrated his death.
They did have a lot of Confederate flags stitched on their baseball caps on their pickup trucks as they waved their guns and their bourbon bottles.
Oh, it's sort of funny how it's really the town square hanging all over, isn't it?
Yeah, which I mean, before we look too far down our noses, it's not that long ago in our civilization that executions were public affairs. So, pretty much the best entertainment in town on execution day. The crowds in London used to, gather round in their thousands to watch people's eyeballs poke out.
True, and we still have it to some extent with this media scrums that occur outside of sentencing hearings and things like that. It's very public. It is a public thing to sentence someone to. I mean, we don't do death anymore, or corporal punishment, or whatever. But
yeah, I mean, there is an argument for justice being seen to be done in public.
Yeah. It's probably a bit of a debate too far for this podcast. But, I mean, as far as this, I mean, it's only a 4-part documentary. Awesome.
And wasn't that nice? We've been complaining about things being too long.
I totally agree. Great footage. Awesome footage of him in the courtroom. Videotapes from the time, I mean, it was the 70s, so everything's, kind of in colour. Production values pretty good, really, for news sort of level footage. So it's visually,
although some of these people being interviewed were saying this was the first time they'd ever done outside broadcasts, and it was absolutely pushing the technical envelope for TVs at the time.
But it's a really visually appealing, and there's enough, sort of first-person contact with Bundy to make it, an interesting series. I think there is something here for people that are into true crime.
Yeah.
I think if you didn't know anything about Ted Bundy, it'd be a slightly misleading characterization of him as a killer and what he was about. But
I think, like any documentary, it's a good place for doing further research. Good starting place for doing further research. I'd also say I thought it was amazing what a bad liar Ted Bundy was. Considering how he keeps being painted as the master convincer, there are so many times when he's looking straight to camera trying to make a point. And it's just like, I know he's lying.
And he lied so much. He constantly lied.
I didn't need the context of this being Ted Bundy, the serial killer. I know he did it. He's saying he didn't do it. I could look at him and watch the twitches go across his face. And I'm not the best reader of people. And be like, this dude is just lying.
There comes point, I think, though, that's the thing. Does he want... I think at some point he wants people to think he's lying, and he just lies for the sake of it, but he knows people know it's a lie.
Oh, I'm not sure. I didn't get...
He's such a complicated person.
Yeah, I didn't think he was being that devious. But, anywho, how many stars from you?
I'm going to give it 4 stars. I nearly went for 3, but I think it's really well made, and I think if you're into true crime, this does actually offer something new. I think doesn't offer a lot that's new about Ted Bundy. Interestingly, sorry, as an aside before you do the stars, apparently Netflix had to release a thing that basically said stop saying that Ted Bundy's too hot to be a serial killer because he's really evil, and because apparently people were tweeting Netflix being like, oh, Ted Bundy's so hot. And they're like, you need to all remember this guy is like a brutal killer.
I think that's one of these little things Netflix puts out to generate more buzz.
Maybe we'll anyway. Suck it, man.
I didn't actually think... I mean, he was more charismatic than your average slavering caricature of a psychopath. I didn't think he was actually... I thought his hook was more his averageness rather than his exceptional charm or handsomeness. But he had some charm and handsomeness. But yeah, I didn't think he was that special.
I think he's a good-looking guy. He'd be the best-looking serial killer.
Yeah, but as I was saying, that's a low bar from the monsters and myth and tropes that makes up the gallery of serial killers. Probably could have been a great con man if he hadn't gone into serial killing. Anyway, I'm going to give it 4 stars with the caveat that this is true crime stars, not general entertainment stars.
See, to be honest, I actually thought it was generally... but maybe I'm a true crime fan, so what's entertaining for me, I can't separate.
It is generally entertaining, but, just before you decide to load it up, it is a true crime documentary, and if you hate that genre, this probably isn't going to turn you around on it.
True.
Anywho, we are at the end of this week, and look, if you've made it this far listening, we'd really like to thank you for doing that. If you could help us out, we would really love getting some stars on our iTunes profile. So your Apple Podcast app, just drop those 5 stars on the podcast.
You could probably do 4. We'd take 4.
Look, you can do 4 if you have to, but if you're doing it just because we've asked you to, you may as well hit 5, eh? And otherwise, we await your emails at gmtrpodcast@gmail.com. At this point, we are very likely to read out any email that we do get at that address. If you otherwise want to leave us a message on any of the social media or websites on which this podcast appears, we are always interested in your views and highly appreciative of them. That's it from me. It is still stinking hot in Canberra, but, at least we're not having the winter that North America's having, so...
we'll just complain about that in about 3 months. Yeah,
but at least we can put more clothes on.
True.
I am actually wearing a shirt this week, so...
And pants.
And pants. Even, look, I've got shoes on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ooh la la.
Ooh la la. Making an effort this week. Thanks very much, folks. We are moving to a Wednesday schedule.
At least for the short term.
At least in the short term, yeah. Thanks very much, and we'll be back in your ears soon.
Thanks, folks.